I love Lapis. Hello, Coolman229 here with a slight change in where I place my camera with another Topic of the Week video. This week, of course, on Lapis Lazuli from Steven Universe. Today's topic was submitted by Tumblr Anon, and they asked, Lapis and how she is written, including the abuse and how the portrayal of her character has progressed, of her as a character has progressed. I really do love Lapis. And it's kind of funny because I never really realized how much I loved her as a character until I stopped watching the show. It's kind of weird. The less involved I got with the show, the more I cared about Lapis. Maybe it's the fact that by the time I left the show, the one thing I actually did care about was Lapis. And I actually stopped watching before Lapis came back. And even after I stopped watching the show, there's one thing that I always kept up with. Lapis. Nah, for the most part, I kind of ignored filler stuff, but I did keep up with Lapis, and Lapis is really, of course, the only thing that I care about at this point, which is sad, because I have mentioned this before in my Where Steven Universe Went Wrong video, which you can check that out here. It's that I used to really love this show, so it's the fact that it's all become boiled down to a single character that I like that hasn't been messed up. Well, yet, in any significant degree, is really sad. Now, on to the actual topic itself. First off, we'll talk about how Lapis is written. And to talk about that, we have to go all the way back to Season 1. Lapis is introduced in the mid-season finale, the mid-season of Season 1, where she is in the mirror, and of course there's that whole thing with Lapis being trapped in the mirror, coming out, being crazy and everything, and Steven healing her gem and basically helping her stabilize where she acts like a normal human being, or, well, sane. Can't say human being because she's not human, but she acts sane and then flies up to Homeworld, not coming back until the season finale. And eventually she does, when she comes back. I mean, everything in Season 1 is generally really good. And to include the abuse, which is where the stuff with Jasper comes in, that's where that little plot line starts. When Lapis comes back, right before she comes back, she actually sends a message to Steven to warn him and everyone else there that there's some crap coming your way. And then, of course, Peridot, finishing out her Season 1 little character arc, and Lapis come back, and we're introduced to Jasper. Jasper being the brute of the team, and more or less being the Nappa. So, nothing really significant with them happens outside of her being aggressive, which she's aggressive with everyone, until you get to the end when she grabs Lapis as Lapis tries to flee and forces her to fuse, with Lapis tricking her to save everyone else and trapping Jasper into the ocean. In which we find out that she'd basically been suffering under mental torture as Jasper tries to take control to, well, basically just be evil, because that's what Jasper does. So, yeah, that part of her stuff, that generally a lot of that is finely written. We know that she suffered months of this mental anguish up until Malachite comes back and defuses. And I didn't watch. I think it was Super Watermelon Island when Malachite came back and ended up getting defused. But Lapis comes back and she has to deal with some of the issues that she has. Now, and I do want to say that from what I've seen, Lapis generally has some pretty decent stuff. And I actually do like her ultimate, friendship with Peridot, and tying in Peridot's character arc of having her basically moving from being, villain status to being kind of a would-be villain, where they were bad, but you kind of felt sorry for them. up into straight up Whoopi status where she's basically alone on Earth, ultimately becoming a good guy, even if she's, even if she is not a fully 100% good person, she does have her own issues, but which is just Peridot's personality. Which is, I actually have to say, I honestly think Peridot has probably one of the best character arcs in the entire series. And considering that she's a side character, that's pretty pathetic for the show. I mean, the main characters, Steven included, should all have much stronger character arcs, but they don't, which is sad. Lapis is the other character who does get a character arc, for the most part. The Jasper seems to have met her end for now, but talking about Lapis. Overall, Lapis' story is fairly well written, as well written as the show can be, because the show does have a big problem with stuffing filler in and just doing a lot of generally pointless stuff, which is just fluff until the next episode, and that's more fluff in the next episode, which is the main reason why I stopped watching the show in the first place. One of the biggest flaws, and something that I did talk about in my previous video, is that, or my previous Steven Universe video, is one of the biggest problems with Lapis as a character is her clearly rewritten backstory. Because, and you can definitely refer to my video about, what exactly, my thoughts on all of them are in terms of theory-wise, but it was heavily implied in Lapis's introductory pairing of episodes that it seemed that Garnet and Amethyst did have some idea of who Lapis was, and they knew something, but it wasn't quite clear. It was implying something, and it was actually some really good implication that the gems might have done something that was morally reprehensible, or something that was downright wrong, and it was kind of completely dropped. The story ended up being that Lapis got punched by Bismuth and ended up getting put in the mirror, and then Pearl found it. It just, it feels so wrong, because this is probably one of the worst things about Lapis's character. She obviously had a very rich backstory, and it feels like there's supposed to be something here, but it feels like you have a square, and it's like this big. It's big, and then it looks like it's kind of colored green, and then you have a circle in it that's just magenta, and it's there, and it's like a small circle in this big square, and it's right there, and you're just sitting there, you're like, okay, that looks like it's the wrong color, and it looks like should be more. That's what Lapis's backstory feels like. All these implications and all the stuff that we pretty much, a lot of people have been theorizing heavily in Season 1, and a lot of stuff that made a lot of sense, seems to have gotten completely dropped, and then hastily rewritten, and it makes me angry, because I love Lapis, and I honestly really love the idea of the crystal gems being written in a way that, yes, they've done some bad stuff in the past, but they do good now, so, or they've been doing good for a long time, so they've worked past that. But the bad things in your past coming back to haunt you is actually a really great, plot element, and it just feels like that kind of got scrubbed out, and it's so annoying, because Lapis deserves to have this morally complex backstory, and it feels like they kind of scrubbed that and focused entirely on the abuse aspect of her character. Which, while is an interesting part, it shouldn't be all there is, and then her story felt like it needs something to it. Which, an actual extra real reason to have conflict with the crystal gems makes more sense. To have that as an extra element that really kind of brings her character, it really gives her the extra depth of her overcoming the stuff involving the crystal gems. But, of course, we didn't get that. And it just feels so it felt like a lot of the stuff, which I do believe I mentioned in my other Steven Universe video, I felt like there's a lot of stuff that was just, they had ideas, they had story, and then they kind of tossed it all out and tried to hastily rewrite something that didn't seem nearly as complex. Because it almost felt like, oh no, we can't have any, moral complexity with the gems, unless we want to start drama. Lapis, thankfully, from what I can tell, hasn't been dragged too much into that. But I do really love, she has had numerous moments with Steven, and considering that Steven was her really first friend, it makes a lot of sense. Alone at Sea was really good, which the episode where she punched Jasper into the sky was excellent. And her dealing with her abuse is good. And but overall, she has a lot of fluff to her character, which all the characters do, because that's basically what Steven Universe is now. It's just a lot of fluff episodes that don't really mean a whole lot, other than being, wow, look how emotional we are. Look how progressive we are. It feels a lot like Adventure Time. It pains me that I have to say that. But regardless, Lapis is probably one of the better written characters outside of her backstory, or in general character stuff. She has a lot of good character moments. She had a character arc in terms of getting over her issues with Peridot and ultimately living in the barn with her being roommates, and them ultimately becoming friends. I do like that, and I do appreciate that. But ultimately, Lapis's character arc is good, with some really confusing changes, obvious changes to her backstory, which just kind of feel like they take a lot of the wind out of the sails of that. Now, as for her abuse, this is something that gets a little bit more complicated to talk about, especially when you want to involve the Steven Universe fandom in it. So, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the video, but let's just start over so we can get full context. Lapis tried to save the crystal gems, and Steven, mostly Steven, from Jasper, who was nigh unstoppable and a complete psychopath. She wanted to murder everyone because she's freaking crazy. So, when she tries to flee from Jasper, ultimately gets grabbed and dragged to the ground, and she says, "Fuse with me." And she tries to pit her against the crystal gems, emotionally manipulating her by saying, they're your real enemies, basically. And of course, she's, completely nuts. And Lapis seems like she does accept it. They fuse, and then Lapis drags her into the ocean. Goodbye, Jasper, and goodbye, Lapis. Now, a lot of people in the fandom, especially the Jasper fandom, because the Jasper fandom can't help but stand the hell out of Jasper, want to play this as Lapis being evil. This is so laughable to me. I'm sorry, I can't take this seriously. Lapis was her prisoner, possibly tortured and interrogated by her. Considering Jasper's personality, it seems extremely likely. A lot of people wanted to go, but Jasper's just doing her job. Jasper didn't do anything wrong. Jasper's introduction literally is, she wants to come in and kill Steven. She also defuses Garnet and imprisons Garnet. Jasper's a good person. No, she's not. She's evil. Kind of the point. You don't see people in the Dragon Ball Z fandom looking at Nappa, who she's especially with Nappa and Vegeta, it's clearly there was clearly a reference to Nappa and Vegeta with Peridot and Jasper. With Jasper clearly being the Nappa. Nappa was not exactly a complex character, and you don't see the Dragon Ball Z fandom going, ugh, no one ever respects Nappa. Well, I mean, he does have some fans, mostly people because of the abridged series, but the absolute love that Jasper gets. And I don't inherently dislike people liking Jasper. That's not the problem. And honestly, if people like her for a villain, that's totally cool. Loving villains for being villains is great. But they don't love her for being a villain. And I've seen numerous times that people try to whitewash her as being completely innocent, and then try to whitewash what she did and her personality into being the big buff Cheeto Puff. And if you're wondering why I'm talking so much about Jasper here, it's because, well, the Jasper fandom hates Lapis. Or they love Lapis, as long as they're shipping Jaspis. And it's really disgusting, honestly. Because the fandom doesn't love Jasper. They love their own version of Jasper. Oh, the sexy buff wife. Oh, I just want Jasper to step on me. That's generally what it is, with very few actual exceptions of Jasper fans who like Jasper for being Jasper. Jasper's evil. Jasper's horrible. She's cruel. And that's cool. I love plenty of villains who aren't all that complex. I mean, hell, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think Albert Wesker is all that complex of a character in Resident Evil. He's one of my favorite villains of all time. He's evil because he's a raging douchebag who wants power and control. So he's going to torture people, he'll kill people, he'll beat the crap out of people, he'll humiliate people. He'll do pretty much anything as long as it means getting ahead. And I love him for being a villain. There's a reason why he's one of my favorite villains, is because he's so interesting as a character. And Jasper's interesting as a character in a lot of ways. A lot of people don't care about that, and they just bash Lapis. Lapis is, in a lot of ways, saddled with the blame for what Jasper did. And they are very tightly linked as characters because of the Malachite situation. Excuse me. Because they were fused for so long, and Jasper basically ends up being an abusive ex, she comes back and tries to demand that, Lapis fuse with her. And Alone at Sea, Jasper comes back. And this is where we get a lot of controversy for her character. Mainly for people who are just looking for any excuse to bash Lapis. But, Jasper comes in with, I've changed, you've changed me, let's just form Malachite again. And then tries to make Steven out to be the enemy. The one person who has been Lapis's solid friend, her first real friend, if not in millennia, ever. So, you can see why she's full of crap. And then she tries to kill Steven. Lapis, protecting Steven, uses her water powers to deck Jasper and toss her to the stratosphere. Which some people were pissed off at. Mostly the Jasper fandom, because they don't like her being shown for what she is. A violent, horrible psychopath. It's not like she was written as a deep, complex character with numerous, nuanced layers to her character. She came in as like, I'm going to destroy Rose Court. Okay, guys. She's super complex. So, we're talking about the abuse. Jasper is the source of the abuse. She tried to force Malachite, and when Lapis went along with it, tricked her, and of course, the fandom, this is what really gets me. The fandom hypocritically accuses Lapis of betraying the sanctity of fusion. Really? Sanctity of fusion. And what was Jasper trying to do? Oh yeah, force the fusion. She just turned Jasper's own game on her and stopped her. So, Jasper tries to force a fusion. That's totally okay. Fair game, actually. I mean, stupid Lapis. Why would she not want to merge with the big buff Cheeto Puff who enslaved her, basically? Then, but Lapis, who tricks Jasper, who wanted to use that power to kill the crystal gems in Steven, is wrong for stopping her from killing the crystal gems in Steven, their main characters. Especially Steven, who's more or less a cinnamon roll, especially in season 1. And then we have people saying Lapis is abusive for holding her down there. She very clearly made a heroic sacrifice, sacrificing her own autonomy and her own freedom and her own, well, really sanity, to be perfectly honest, in order to keep Jasper away from them. And ultimately, we see that this takes a very, very strenuous toll on her mentally, as she's trying to keep this fusion and keep Jasper from taking control. I've actually seen people actually call this, well, it's people who are at least somewhat reasonable and don't deny that Jasper is abusive as hell, even try to go so far as to say, well, it's mutually abusive. Because Jasper is clearly totally abusive to Jasper right back, so that means she's a terrible person too. The only reason they say this is because they don't want Jasper to hold the blame. They want Lapis to. And they'll come up with any reason too. And this is something that pisses me off. I really wish I didn't have to talk about it this much. But I kind of have to, because there's always going to be these people, and I mean, even if I'm going through the Lapis Lazuli tag on Tumblr, there's always people posting hate for Lapis in the tag. There's always people accusing Lapis of being, oh, I love Lapis, but I think she's a horrible, abusive monster. Sure, Jan. And since then, she has ultimately calmed down. She and Peridot have had their own little, story arc of, becoming friends with Lapis, ultimately overcoming her hatred of Peridot, given Peridot being an accomplice and being, partially even behind the crap that she suffered through up to the season 1 finale. So you can't really blame her. Despite the fact that Peridot has changed, you can't really blame her for being hesitant of being friends and living with her. But ultimately, that's past, and I don't believe there's any significant change in the character since then. Now, talking about some of Lapis's lines from Alone at Sea when she talks about Jasper, when she feels like she's the monster. That's it. Canon proof. Lapis is evil. She said she's a monster. We can go home, guys. No need to do anything. No need to think. In fact, we can just go home because Lapis is evil. Good gosh, people. Jasper comes in with clearly abuser lines. I've changed. You've changed me. Come together and we can be powerful. Saying she comes in and I've changed. You've changed me. Yeah, no. Even I'm sitting here screaming, jeez, she's some sort of abusive ex. And then Lapis saying that she feels like she's the one who's responsible, she's the one who's wrong. Everyone's always ready to flip the script on Lapis that she's horrible. She feels guilty. She feels like she's responsible. And, ignoring the fact that even numerous people who have been in abusive situations have actually said, yeah, there's a lot of, self-guilt you have, especially when, when Jasper accuses Lapis of being a monster. Yeah, the abuser wants the abused to feel like it's their fault. Because, that's part of the power dynamic of an abusive relationship. The abuser doesn't want them to be accused of being in the wrong. They try to flip it and control the abusee. Lapis, in her self-guilt and her panicking, you can see she's very clearly shown to be, suffering through that moment with Steven, and admitting things to Steven as she felt like it was good to hurt Jasper, and yeah, it's good to hurt a psychopath who did unexplained, probably horrible things to her. off screen, which honestly I kind of wish they would elaborate on it, but whatever. And this person who comes in and tries to kill all your friends, or more specifically the one real friend you have, and, she says it feels good, and she's obviously like disturbed by a lot of this, and clearly she's suffering from some severe like post-traumatic stress disorder from all of this situation, and some serious mental issues going on. And I do congratulate them on trying to get into this. I just kind of wish, the show wasn't so poorly written, but it has moments that were decent, and this is one of them. This is all very clearly shown Lapis as someone who's racked with tons of guilt over being in this situation and basically having suffered all this time, and Jasper being the one who caused all of this suffering. And a lot of people still, to this day, for some reason, think that Lapis is the sole person who's responsible for all of this. And good gosh. I mean, people have actually said this is actual victim blaming in fandoms. People always accuse victim blaming. But this is actually it. Lapis, who suffers all this, is the one who's blamed for it, when Jasper, the actual clear abuser, even going so far as to use classic abuser lines, is the one who's clearly the innocent victim in all of this. Okay. And it's stupid. It's really, really stupid. But a lot of people think Jasper's hot, and while I disagree strongly, they're free to think that. Just because you think a character is hot doesn't mean you have to go out of your way to erase the fact that they're a villain or that they've done bad things just because you think they're hot. I think Jerry Han from Street Fighter is hot. She's kind of freaking crazy. And I'm not going to say, well, she's really just an innocent waifu, she's not really a sadistic nut job who gets off on hitting people and getting hit, Let's just be real here. Enjoy a character for what they are, and don't try to completely reinvent this character to fit your own preferences just because you don't want to admit that the character is actually bad. And I have to say, I think the Jasper fandom is actually worse than the Loki fandom. The verdict's still on if they're worse than the Hannibal fandom, who actually thought that Hannibal was innocent. Regardless, I think that's it I want to talk about on the abusive situation, because holy crap, there's way too much to talk about. And way too much crap that that doesn't even involve the show. It involves the darn fandom. The darn Steven Universe fandom, which is full of nut jobs and actual victim blamers and people who are abuse apologists just because they like the character. Holy crap, the fandom's messed up. But I don't want to talk about the fandom anymore. Let's push that to the side. Let's go back to Lapis for the last part of this topic. How the portrayal of her character has progressed. Now, let's just take a look at screenshots of her character. When she's first introduced, it's through the mirror. And, once we actually get her in her actual gem form, she kind of ends up attacking people and kind of steals the Earth's oceans. Now, she was actually very much set up as a villain in this situation, sympathetic but still a villain, up until Steven heals her gem. And we know that a gem's it's so redundant to say that, but a gem's gem is something that's very important. It is actually their core being. When it's cracked, they suffer as a result of that, and without it being healed, they end up becoming unstable. We even saw this with Amethyst when her gem was cracked. She started getting wackier and wackier until the point where she's pretty much the personification of wing beings at some point. By the time it got severely cracked, ultimately needing to be fixed. And she needed to wait to heal before she actually reformed herself. And on top of that, having thousands, possibly thousands of years of isolation in the mirror, along with cracked gem and being unable to be sane, is gonna do. You're gonna come out of that pretty messed up. And a lot of people like to hold this against Lapis, which I find is utterly ridiculous in the fandom, because we know that the second Steven, slaps some of his healing spit on her gem, all of a sudden she's like, oh, she's normal. She can access her powers completely, including her water wings. And she calmly, she has a little chat with Steven, and she calmly leaves to go back to Homeworld. Overall, it was revealed that she's very much a sympathetic character, and obviously one that suffered and had been doing a lot of stuff basically involuntarily. This is even reflected later on when Greg has drawn an album cover with the Water Witch, which is Lapis, and Steven basically, I don't remember the line, I think it's she's not a witch, she's just misunderstood, or something along those lines, basically saying she wasn't bad, she just had some problems, mainly the fact that she was almost forcibly, due to her cracked gem, unable to be sane. And when she comes back, there's the whole thing that I described. She tries to warn Steven, and then she ultimately ends up ending the season 1 finale by trapping Malachite. Now, overall, she's basically absent for almost everything, and even up to what I watched, which was a few episodes after the cluster was introduced by Peridot, and she's basically absent from the show until she comes back and is ultimately rescued by the crystal gems. It's at this point that we actually start getting Lapis as an actual character, that we actually get to see her. And some of the stuff is nice. She acts kind of a dickish, but it's mostly she's still trying to come off some of her issues, and ultimately she does end up adjusting to Earth, to the crystal gems, to Peridot, and I do find her more interesting for it. And she does have moments like in Alone at Sea when the trauma and the abuse with Jasper gets brought up, and she does have those moments of just severely struggling, and I understand, honestly, having been in a messed up relationship and having been in something that really kind of affected you long term, I understand. There are times when you're fine, and then something comes up and you're just like, you almost lose it, just because all those feelings and memories come rushing back. And I totally understand. And she's probably reached a point in terms of in a plateau of character development, when she's been getting development, not appearing, getting some development, and she's probably hit a plateau at this point, considering the fact that most of her main conflicts are gone. Conflict with the Crystal Gems is long since ended. Her conflict with Jasper is gone, since Jasper's not around at this point. Until I'm sure maybe Jasper will come back. Her conflict with Peridot has been resolved, and they're now friends, which I'm glad. I like their friendship. And they're now barnmates, like roommates in a barn. So overall, the portrayal of her character has actually been pretty solid. Outside of a few hiccups, again, like I said, with her backstory, the portrayal of her character and how she's been shown has been pretty good. They maintain that she's the victim of the whole situation with Jasper, which is 100% fact. And I from what I've seen, and I've checked out a lot of what Jasper did outside of the most recent stuff, is pretty much the same as it is since she basically got over her issues with Peridot. And honestly, I think this is the problem that a lot of the Steven Universe has, is that now it's kind of coasting with its characters. And I'm sure something will come up. They'll invent something else for it, but regardless. So, in conclusion of all of this, Lapis suffers from the same problems that the show itself suffers from, which affect everyone. Character arcs that seemingly were started get aborted. Some interactions exist solely to create drama, and some of the stuff with Peridot that feel like it was meant to create drama or existed for a joke. And yeah, but she, I think, gets out of this a lot better than other characters in the show. Steven has come across as a Mary Sue at times, and an outright selfish, obnoxious jerk at times. Poor Steven. Pearl probably comes out as the worst. And then you have Garnet, who basically acts like a pretentious douchebag at times, especially when she's portrayed as the love guru. And Amethyst has done some pretty messed up stuff in the past, especially when she transformed into Rose just to screw with Greg, and as revenge for him not wanting to hang out. Which really, a lot of that darker stuff kind of gets scrubbed out from the crystal gems, so they come off as a lot blander than they used to. But really, Lapis as a character has, I think, come out as better than others. Peridot, I still think, probably has the strongest character development out of all of them. And that's almost typical of what you get from villains turned heroes. Because Lapis was never really a villain. In a lot of ways, she's a type of anti-villain. She was doing bad things, but considering that she really didn't have much of a control over herself, you can't really hold that against her. Peridot, on the other hand, was doing some bad stuff, but ultimately turned good. And it's the same reason why people find character development from characters like Vegeta or Zuko far more interesting than the other good characters. Excuse me. Because it's a lot more interesting to see a bad character on the path to becoming good. But really, Lapis, I do think, comes out of this the best and still remains one of my favorite characters. And honestly, there's really nothing that the show could do. I mean, I still love Pearl. Pearl's still my second favorite gem, despite all the horrible things they did to her since season 1 ended. Oh, good gosh, Pearl, you did not deserve anything like that. But still, I love Lapis, and I love the fact that she's gotten some decent portrayal. So despite the fact that the show is pretty poorly written. But really, that's it. Alright, I think that's about it for this video. I'm actually going to be taking votes for the theme for December. My Christmas theme is going to be all about a single video game franchise. Now I'll be choosing, I have a list of 4 different, games that, franchises that I'm going to offer to do, I'll want to do topics on, and I'm going to let people choose what they want me to do. So the current topics I have are Metal Gear, Zelda, Overwatch, and literally just wrote this down. And Star Fox. How could I forget that? So yes, you can actually, you can say one of those 4 down below in a comment, or I'll be posting a link to the post I have for that on my Tumblr if you want to reblog it or reply or say something, or even send an ask about a specific topic. And if you want to send me topics on any one of those franchises, please feel right ahead. And I'll take any kind of topic that you guys want to send, because I'm kind of running a little low. So if you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here. But just remember to follow the rules, which I will post down below. I'll make sure that it's about something fictional, whether it's in universe or a meta perspective. A lot of times, people want a meta perspective on writing or an in universe of, how characters were, other portrayal, like this one. So, yeah, feel free to send any topic you want me to talk about, and if you're not sure if I actually understand, or if I really know anything about it, or am familiar with it, just ask me, because I will tell you if I'm familiar with something or not. So, yes, please go and vote on what game series you want me to do my December theme month on, and send me some topics. And yeah, thank you for watching, and tune in next week for next week's topic video.